Good evening, friends. This is Ramji from Coimbatore. I'm a past chairman of the Coimbatore branch and also the past president of Auditors Association. It gives me a great pleasure to meet all of you on this evening on a very interesting topic about fundamentals of cloud architecture and software as a service. To talk about this very interesting topic, we are having an expert in this field. Who is a chartered accountant and a digital transformation professional with more than a decade's experience in process automation, process improvement, digital transformation, and strategy leadership. He's seen as an influencer in the finance transformation space, having worked on multiple process transformation initiatives for large organizations. He helps organizations in scaling and democratizing digital transformation and also shares this knowledge across multiple conferences and industry events on digital transformation. He's also an angel investor and is working on incubating an accounting and compliance management SaaS-based product for SMBs and MSMEs to hyper-automate back office process. May I welcome CA Saurabh Goenka, the speaker of the evening. And before I hand over the session to the speaker of the evening, just let me give some idea about what I have gained, some little knowledge about the cloud architecture. If you look at the cloud architecture, it's something which helps you to, there are three types of cloud architecture. One is called infrastructure as a service, then you have platform as a service, and the third one you have software as a service. Now, if you look at the importance of cloud today, especially during the work from home era, post-COVID, you find that there's a lot of dependence on the cloud computing, the power of cloud computing, and today you find the large ERP softwares like SAP and Oracle, they have all come up with cloud solutions. Now, the advantage of a cloud solution is that one, it helps to save cost in terms of creating an infrastructure, which otherwise it would be quite costly. The second thing is it depends on, they have got the renting, the revenues in the form of renting. So you could rent out server space, you could rent out softwares which you would like to use. So all these are coming as a part of a package. So today, Saurav is going to talk about the importance of cloud architecture and how these are going to influence our decision making in the future, and what is the basically right from the large ERPs to a very smallest. Even Tally is now looking at cloud as an option. So today, most of us who are using computers hands-on, this becomes a very important option and also a very cost-effective and very economic model. So I would now request Saurav to please take us through this cloud architecture, fundamentals of cloud architecture, and also the software as a service model. Over to you, Saurav.
Thank you so much. No, it's an absolute pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure. And I am also based out of Bangalore, so SIRC is very, very close to my heart. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my insights and bringing me here. And a very good evening to all the participants who have come here. And first of all, I want to congratulate everyone for coming here for a technical topic. I remember I started doing these sessions with ICAI for some of these digital transformation topics almost 2.5 to 3 years back. And that time, very few people used to come. Till today, I have done close to 100 sessions, but more and more people are coming up, and the enthusiasm with which people are realizing the importance of some of these elements, it is actually very encouraging. And because this is basically where the entire profession is headed. So thanks to everyone for coming in. I'll just quickly start sharing my screen. I hope that you are able to see my screen now. Let me just readjust some of these things at my end. Yes, great. All right. So, guys, in terms of the agenda today, let me first quickly talk about the agenda. I will first want to talk about what is cloud computing, right? We have to fund basically before we understand any of these concepts like software as a service, as Ramji sir mentioned, you have infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and so many different things which are there. The fundamental of all of these things lies in cloud computing. So we first need to understand what is cloud computing. Then within cloud computing itself, there are multiple types of cloud, right? There is a private cloud, public cloud, hybrid cloud. So what are all of these different cloud-based models and how do they work? Then what are the different cloud service models, right? Even though these cloud models may exist, how do they basically interact with the end user? And then based on these cloud service models, who are the top cloud service providers? So that's one entire area of learning, which is the learning of cloud. Next, we will talk about all of these as a service model. So software as a service. Then within the SaaS ecosystem, what are the different types of SaaS applications which are there? And of course, as Ramji sir also mentioned, I want to talk about what are the benefits of SaaS, right? Now, the way the whole world has moved, earlier the focus was on creating customized software for individual companies. Now that focus has completely moved away, and nobody wants to have customized software. They want to have software which are standardized and which are available in a software as a service kind of a format, right? So what are these benefits of your software as a service models which make people want to move with this? Then I want to make it slightly more deeper, where I want to talk a little bit about the architecture, right? Now, you may have heard of all of these things like there's a back-end technology, front-end technology, there is a gateway, there are APIs, there are databases. What are all of these things, right? So think of this as a crash course which will help you understand all aspects of cloud, all aspects of SaaS, all aspects of these various backend and front end technologies which are there, right? Then I want to contextualize this a little bit more to the world of ERPs, right? What are ERPs, and specifically what are these SaaS based ERPs? And then of course, since all of us are from the finance community, I want to contextualize some of this into the world of finance and talk a little bit about within the entire finance world, what are the prominent SaaS based ERPs and SaaS based finance tools. Then I want to touch upon a very interesting theme. See, lots of new startups and young startups in the country today, they have started creating their own SaaS based platforms. And some of us might be curious that, if I want to create my own SaaS based platform, how do I basically do that, right? So I want to talk then a little bit more about how can you create your own SaaS based platform. What are the different components of technology which you need as a part of it to create your own SaaS based platform? And then for you to do this, what are the typical challenges, right? So essentially, there are four parts to today. First, I will talk about cloud computing. Then I will talk about software as a service. Third, I will talk about what are the prominent SaaS-based ERP solutions and how do they function. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about what if you want to create your own SaaS-based solution, then how can you basically do it, right? And before I move on, I just want to give you a little bit more overview about who I am and what I do. So, like all of you, I am a chartered accountant. I have, you probably have much more experience than me, but I have 11 plus years of experience today. I started my career with Wipro. I was with Wipro for about 4 or 5 years, and then within Wipro also, I was doing some finance transformation work. I was part of the finance transformation team. I built some applications for them to automate the entire reporting of your financial P&Ls and things like that. After which I became an entrepreneur. I founded two different companies. One of them is called Mindmap Consulting, and the other one is called Mindmap Digital. Mindmap Consulting was focused more towards the entire skilling and learning industry, where we work with companies to enable the learning of teaching digital skill sets to the employees of all Fortune 500 companies. And Mindmap Digital, as Ramji sir was also explaining, is a little bit more in the whole digital transformation space, where we work with companies to build their roadmap. Um, so I've set up multiple businesses. Very recently, I was invited by the Forbes Business Council to join them. From India, there are about 25 members, and I'm one of them. It's a council where I share my insights on digital transformation. I've recently been awarded as the 40 under 40 Global Innovators by Analytics India and the top 10 RPA firms within India by the CIO Review magazine. And I keep publishing lots of articles in the CA magazine and several other articles as well. By the end of the today's session, I will also share some documents with you, which you can use to basically, stay aware and abreast of what's happening in the industry. But most importantly, the reason I wanted to share my journey is because sometimes we as chartered accountants, we feel that it's technology is very tough for us, but trust me, technology is not tough for us. The very fact that you are a CA, it shows that you have some metal, right? You have some capability. And I've worked with all kinds of people all across the world, and Indian chartered accountants I find to be, extremely intellectual. So guys, don't be afraid of tech. And of course, I am there with you in your journey, however you want me to be there with you. And throughout the session, guys, if you have any questions, I encourage you to please specify your questions in the chat window. There is a questions box, and then there is also a chat box. Uh, Please write down all of your questions in the chat box as and when you have those questions with you, because I want to make sure that you get the answers on the fly. And since it's a little bit of a technical subject, it's possible that you might not follow some of these areas. So please put your questions there. And even if you want to ask any questions from the field of artificial intelligence, automation, any digital technologies, and any of these areas, any of the work which I do, please feel free to use this opportunity for the interaction and send me those questions as well. The idea for me being with you here today, the idea for Mr. Ramji to organize this session for you is so that you take the maximum benefit from today's session, and that can happen if we keep it interactive, right? So please pop in your questions. And on that note, let me start. So I will first talk about what is cloud computing and how does it work, right? Now, the most easiest way for you to understand what cloud computing really is if you, let me actually give you a very good analogy, right? Today, if you want to go out and if you want to buy the best laptop, right? The best laptop today, which would cost somewhere around 1 lakh to 1.5 lakh, how much storage does it come with? It comes with a storage of maybe 128 gigabytes, 256 gigabytes, not more than that. Now, 5 years back, or 7 years back, or 10 years back, when you went to buy a new laptop or a new PC for yourself, your primary condition would be, I want a 500 GB hard drive, or I want a 1 terabyte hard drive. And today you see the most sophisticated systems, they actually are not valued in terms of how much storage they have. That has completely changed. The reason for this change is because the way data is processed, it is completely changed, right? Earlier, data used to be processed locally. If you have your PC would have a motherboard, it would have RAM, it would have ROM, it would have hard drive, it would have the Intel chipset. And if you have software would be locally installed on your system. All the data processing would happen there. And hence, all the data storage would also happen there, right? And this localization of data storage and data computation used to make everything very expensive because you need to invest in that computing power at your end. Now, cloud computing is just the way the name suggests. What it basically means is assume that there is a layer of the cloud, right? There is a layer of the cloud here like this. And then in this cloud, all the data gets processed. So these are your devices. On the right hand side, the image which you see, you have a tablet, you have a laptop, you have a PC. These devices, they are responsible only for sending packets of information to a centralized processing unit which resides somewhere, right? When you say it resides in the cloud, what it basically means is that there is some big technology company like an Amazon or a Microsoft or a Google who have these huge data centers, and they have leased out space from their data centers to you, right? The processing happens there. Let me give you a very good and very relatable example of cloud computing. Now, all of us would have used some of these applications like, uh, you know, Alexa or Siri or OK Google and all of these things. The moment you pick up your phone and you say, "Hey Siri, can you please, multiply 4 with 24 and give me the answer?" The computation of that does not happen on your phone. The computation happens on Apple servers. That entire thing is known as cloud computing, right? So cloud computing is a practice of using large groups of remote servers which are hosted on the internet to store and access applications and computer data rather than saving it on a personal space, right? So you have a series of servers, say 30 servers or 40 servers, which is known as a server farm, and this server farm can be connected with your machine using the internet. So in this way, what happens is you end up leasing space from the cloud computing company, right? So it is a rental mechanism. If you are, for example, if you make a call on your Airtel mobile phone, you will pay for the one call which you make because you are leasing the entire facility of making calls, right? Similarly, if you're using the cloud infrastructure for someone, you pay them a rent, right? Or you pay them a subscription fee. Now, there are 5 essential characteristics of the cloud, right? Number one, it will have on-demand self-service. What is the meaning of on-demand self-service? It means that it operates in a PAYG model. What is the meaning of PAYG? PAYG stands for pay as you go, right? You only pay for what you consume and you only use the service on demand. For example, and I'm sure you all will relate to this example because we have become big TV buffs in this COVID times. If you want to watch the new season of Money Heist on Netflix, right, then you can subscribe to Netflix today and you can stop subscription at some point of time in the future. That is the meaning of on demand. Whenever you want it, wherever you want it, you can activate it. That's the number one feature of cloud. The number two feature of cloud is a broad network access, right? Now, let me explain what this means. Assume that you have a very large video file. That video file is about, say, 4 or 5 gigabytes for one video file. And if you host that video file somewhere on the internet and you stream it or you download it, since it's a very large file, it will take a lot of time for you to download and process that file. What happens in the case of cloud computing is there is a whole layer between the cloud computing servers and the consumer, which is known as the cloud distribution layer. The cloud distribution layer will stream the entire file into packets. So it is accessible across a range of bandwidths, right? The third important characteristic is that it has something which is known as resource pooling. What is the meaning of resource pooling? There is, some of you might have heard about this concept of distributed file storage system, right? So similarly, you have distributed computing. Remember, we spoke about this whole concept of series of servers, right? So all of these servers computing powers come together and they become a part of the whole cloud computing. So their resources are pooled together. The fourth important point is elasticity. What is the meaning of elasticity? It can automatically scale up or scale down in line with your requirements, right? Let me give you an example. Let's say that you are building an application which is a file video streaming application like YouTube, right? And right now at any given point of time, let's say you have 100 users who are watching videos on your video streaming application. If you are choosing the right cloud computing architecture, which is known as the auto scaling architecture, what will happen is that as more users come in, then more of that data uh, bandwidth will get consumed, right? So it will automatically scale up to become a high capacity server, so that you don't need to pay for the ultimate high capacity server all the time, but you need to pay for it only for the time period at which this is active. This feature is also known as auto scaling. And finally, the fifth characteristic is measured service, which basically means you only pay for all of those areas which you actually consume, right? Now, you might have heard that Amazon Web Services, or AWS, is one of the leading cloud computing companies. If you actually open up an account with AWS, they have something which is known as the AWS cost calculator, right? So within their entire cloud architecture, they have so many different things which are there. They have, storage servers, processing servers, AI machine learning servers, VPNs, and so many different things which are there. So depending upon which one of these services you use, it is extremely modularized, and based on those modules you are required to basically pay for it, right? So that's a very high level overview on what cloud computing is, and at a very layman's level I've tried to explain that, how does it work. Guys, once again, if you have any questions, please keep popping in those questions in the chat window or the questions box, because I will keep referring it to it from time and time again. And the whole intention is that you should get the most out of it, right? Now, in terms of how have we really evolved in terms of cloud, now that we understand what cloud computing is, I want to spend a little bit of time in, basically explaining how the evolution of this has taken place, right? Now, in the entire era, which is your pre-1970s era, this was the whole phase where these things were just coming up, right? So you had these huge computers called mainframes. I know some of you remember this. If anybody here has implemented IT in the 1960s to 1970s, one of the biggest challenges used to be that, buying these bulky servers, creating, even today, some of these government offices, you have these server rooms and server farms where you have these big black steel boxes within which these servers are housed. So this is where, you companies had to purchase mainframes, which are not even personal computers, but these are, it's like supercomputers, but not really supercomputers. They are only as capable as a computer, but it was very bulky earlier. And it requires significant infrastructure and capital expenditure, right? Infrastructure expenditure for all the housing, the cabling, the air conditioning, and all of those things, and capital expenditure in terms of buying those servers. Now, 1980s is the time when the personal computer basically started, right? And the Apple, the IBM, and the Microsofts of the world, they started manufacturing these personal computers, and there was a huge demand for PCs. Now, when PCs came in, this was the first time when decentralized computing started, right? Earlier, what used to happen, everybody could not afford a computer, right? And this PCs was something which was only owned by the biggest companies. But today, in 1980 onwards, you had these PCs being owned by smaller players, also smaller offices, and that led to the birth of the IT services industry. That is where, even if you track the history, most of the big IT giants actually started there. 1990s is the birth of the internet. And now that there is internet, this whole thought process of LAN applications, which are local area network applications, and interconnectivity between various computers and computer systems, this whole thing started happening, right? So then companies started creating their own intranet facilities, which is creating their own entire infrastructure where different devices can talk to each other. And there was an emphasis on networking, and demand for bandwidth started increasing. More and more people needed more and more bandwidth. And how many of us remember in those days, we used to have this dial up modem, right, which used to make this very funny sound when you used to dial to it. And then what happened in 2000, that is where you basically started having modern internet, infrastructure outsourcing started, and there were wide distributing facilities, more IT companies came up, and And 2010 onwards, see, cloud computing, guys, is actually pretty old. Don't go with this conception that cloud computing is new. The rate at which technology is evolving today, even artificial intelligence is an old technology now. It's massive, the pace of change, right? Cloud computing is something which actually took birth somewhere in the year of 2010. 2010 to 2015 was some of these big cloud computing setups happened with AWS, Microsoft Azure, and all of these things. And the whole idea was three things have changed, right? Number one, processing has become now very capable and very powerful. The processors became very powerful. So earlier, the same work which 100 PCs could do, one cloud, one server can do that same piece of work. Second, internet became very robust and reliable. So the communication of data became very robust and reliable. Third, generally, the whole business model around the world and the investment appetite changed, and people wanted to now move away from capital expenditure and move into the world of operating expenditure, right? CapEx to OpEx. And that is the entire discovery of all of these different cloud-based models like infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, so on and so forth. Now, I have one, yeah, I think Mr. Ramji, you made a very good point that for cloud computing, it is essential that your internet should be having very good speed. Is there any minimum speed which is a must? So Ramji sir, actually today, uh, being where we are, we don't need to worry about internet speed because all of us have at least 500 kbps or more. If you have 500 kbps, that is good enough speed. See, because, and thank you for the wonderful question, Ramji sir. See, actually what happens when you're doing cloud computing is your data gets transferred to the cloud in small packets, right? And these packets are not very large. So it does not need a lot of bandwidth to do that. The processing actually happens in the cloud. For that, your bandwidth has nothing to do with it. And when you download, again, it's a small packet. So today, most of us have anywhere between 2 Mbps to 10 Mbps kind of internet. Even if you have, let's say, 500 kbps, you are good with cloud computing, right? For your basic functions like setting up an office, storing files, using some cloud-based ERP solutions, you do not need a lot of bandwidth. You need bandwidth when you're doing, if for example, if you're a videography company, you need to store very heavy duty videos on the cloud. You are using some extremely humongous video content delivery platforms and all of those things. Then in those cases, you might need slightly more bandwidth. Apart from that, bandwidth is one thing you don't really need to worry about, right? So moving on, let me talk a little bit about what are the different cloud deployment models, right? Remember I said that, now that you understand what cloud is, it is also important to understand how can you access cloud, right? Now, we all know that cloud is a place where processing happens in a centralized fashion. You get access to that processing power and storage power, right? So there are two elements to why people use cloud. They use cloud for processing data, they use cloud for storing data, and you get access to this at a fee. It could be a subscription based fee or something else. But there are four different types of cloud deployment models, right? The first model is known as a public cloud. Now, what is a public cloud? A public cloud is owned by somebody who is called a CSP or a cloud service provider. This is an organization which specializes in using and creating cloud computing capabilities. Some examples are Google Cloud Platform, Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure. All of these are public clouds, right? So what happens here is it is like a shared space. So all of these companies, they have a server, they have a cloud layer, and any number of users can start accessing this. Now, for some companies, they don't like using public cloud because they don't want their data to be stored in a shared fashion, even though it is very secure. But because of some of the modern day compliances around GDPR and some more privacy regulations and all of those things, not everybody is comfortable with the model of a public cloud. Hence, you also have a model of a private cloud. Now, what happens in the private cloud? You get the same facilities, but that cloud space is not shared with anybody else. That becomes your own cloud space, right? So, for example, let's say if you are a CA firm and if you want to implement cloud, the easiest way for you is to find a cloud service provider like you've heard about some of these applications like OneDrive, Dropbox, Google Drive. These are all examples of public cloud where these companies, whatever facilities they are giving you, they have a standard model and they are giving these facilities to everybody else. How would private cloud differentiate from this? In case there is somebody who comes and implements a cloud specifically for you, where they build a server, they build a server farm, and they say that nobody apart from your firm will be using it, that becomes private cloud. Now, private cloud, of course, is extremely secure, right? It is actually the most secure version of cloud, and organizations who deal with a lot of sensitive data, they always use private cloud. So customers here, if you have a private cloud, you have complete control over all of the security aspects, right? So it's kind of like the same features like a public cloud, but it gets deployed for you just for yourself. So obviously, from a pricing perspective also, this is slightly more expensive than a public cloud. Now, the third deployment model is known as a community cloud. A community cloud, as the name suggests, is basically maintained and used by a group of organizations. Like, for example, let's say that you have a venture capital firm, and that venture capital firm has lots of startups it has invested in, right? And the venture capital firm can create a community cloud. Similarly, there could be a network of hospitals. All of those hospitals could use a community cloud. There could be a network of all franchisees for a given company. All of them can use a community cloud. So this is somewhere between public cloud and private cloud, because here it is kind of like a private cloud, but you have more than one entity which is surfing on this entire thing. So this is maintained and used by a group of organizations with shared concerns. That is, they have similar security of compliance requirements, right? So when, for example, if all hospitals, so I do a lot of work with some healthcare organizations in the US, they are bound by this regulation called the HIPAA regulation, right? So if some hospitals have similar regulatory requirements, if some banks have similar regulatory requirements, there could be community clouds for them. And finally, you have something which is known as a hybrid cloud, which is a composition of two or more different types of clouds, right? So the way this works is, see, there may be some functions like file storage of non-sensitive files which does not contain financially sensitive information and some of these things, which can actually be stored in the public cloud layer. And there may be some areas which can only be stored in the private cloud. For example, let's say you are building your own algorithm for fraud detection, right? Now you don't want to expose that to public cloud, you want to store that in a private cloud. So you can create a hybrid cloud where you have this stratification. If you see the image also on the right side, you can see there's kind of like three clouds there. So one of them can be a public cloud, one of them can be a private cloud, so on and so forth, right? So it really depends on what your objectives are, and based on those objectives, you can define which one of these are your cloud deployment models. If anyone has any questions related to cloud deployment models, please, go ahead and share those questions here. Now, to go into a little bit more depth in terms of some of these, cloud models. Once again, let's start with public cloud. We all know that one of the best examples here are, again, Google has the Google Cloud Platform, Amazon has the Amazon Web Services, and then you have IBM and some more companies. So the definition is it is external to a client's premises and accessed through internet or private network. The main benefit is that you pay as you go, so the cost is always lower in case of a public cloud, and you don't need to invest in management of a public cloud because it is always managed from the backend by the cloud service provider. So Amazon or Google or IBM, they will manage it themselves, and the utilization of this is also optimized. What is the meaning of this, right? Remember, one of the 5 features of cloud was auto scaling, right? So you only need to lease out so much space or so much computing power which you need at that point of time. If you don't need that much computing power at that point of time, then you don't have to do basically use that. That's the meaning of optimized utilization. Now, what are the disadvantages of public cloud, right? Number one, it has limited customization. You have to, for example, you have an iPhone, right? You open the box, whatever is there in the box, you have to basically use that, right? So you have to use it completely out of the box in terms of a private public cloud. So it has limited customization. Second, some people have security and privacy concerns when they work with public cloud, because your data is being shared, and everybody knows there are every day you have these reports of data being leaked and some of these things which happen. It is rare in case of some of the more recognized cloud platforms like AWS and GCP and Azure, but it is not very rare for some of the Indian public cloud platforms or not very secure public cloud platforms. The other con is lack of network and access reliability, right? Now, typically the best cloud platforms have a uptime of say 99.99%. Anything which less than 98% uptime is not considered good. So for some of the top tier cloud platforms, you have very good uptimes, but sometimes you don't have good uptimes also there, right? So that is your entire scheme of public clouds. Coming to private clouds, the definition of private cloud is that, of course, it is internal and delivered on client's premises. It is accessed and shared only within the enterprise, right? Now, if you work, or if I'm sure there are two types of people in the audience. We have CA firms and CAs in practice, and then we also have individuals who are working for corporates. Now, for whoever is working for a corporate, you would have seen your company has an internal employee portal or an intranet, right? So these are examples of private clouds. The benefit of private cloud is, of course, whatever disadvantages you have here, they become advantages in private cloud. You can customize, you can build it the way you want to build it. It is a completely customized development, whatever modules you want, whatever you want it to look like, whatever speed you want to operate it at. And of course, privacy is the number one area. So all banks never want to use public cloud. Banks always want to use private cloud. It's a big security concern in case banks are working on public cloud. Similarly, since you have a dedicated team which manages the public cloud, it is completely within your control and you have stronger SLAs. However, in terms of cons, of course, the biggest con is that it will be more expensive, right? So you have a lot of IT management overheads. You have scalability concerns, right? Now, remember, in public cloud, what happens is it is auto scaling. So the moment your requirement or appetite increases, it scales on its own. However, when it comes to private cloud, every scalability you have to manually keep adding computing power, and utilization management is complex. Coming to hybrid cloud, as we know, it's a combination of public and private cloud, and then it is a combination of traditional IT and cloud infrastructure, and it is somewhere in the middle. It has some IT management overheads, some pay as you go, some network latency, but it has better integration and security than public cloud. So if you want to be somewhere in between, you can go with a hybrid cloud. Now, Amazon is one player which actually offers both. It offers a public cloud also. It also offers a hybrid cloud where you can basically ask them to customize a hybrid cloud for you. So that's some insights on what are the cloud models. I will actually now go to the various questions and start looking at all the questions. So the first question um, is from Arun Kumar. How does cloud computing take care of data backup and confidentiality? Since, for example, when we use QuickBooks, all our customer data is with the QuickBooks server. How can we rest assured of backup and confidentiality? So, Arun, that's a fantastic question. Now, let me explain how the entire backup piece works right now. Let's say you are using, and we'll generalize this to any accounting software, right? Let's say that you are using any accounting software. What basically happens is that they always have a database structure, which could be a SQL database, NoSQL database, or there are multiple types of databases. Typically, QuickBooks and some of these tools, they use SQL-based databases. Now, these SQL-based databases are places where all of this data is stored. What you can do is you can create some automated backup algorithms by which these databases are backed up on a periodic basis, right? So that backup you have to configure manually, right? You have to sign up for one of the cloud service providers, and then you can create a backup. You have to identify, there are two ways in which QuickBooks data works. One, either it is stored on QuickBooks Cloud and QuickBooks servers, or you have an on-prem version where the QuickBooks data is stored in an on-prem installation in your facility. Now, data backup is simpler in case of an on-prem installation. All you need to do is find out where it is being stored, create a program which will automatically mirror that data onto a cloud storage system. In case, however, where this is on the QuickBooks servers, then you need to build some automation application which will automatically export data dumps, right? In QuickBooks, you have this option where you can export the entire data dump, right? So you can put that entire data dump, export it, and then re-upload it into a cloud-based architecture, right? So, but here in this solution, there are two components. One, there is robotics process automation, which you have to use to create a bot which can automatically download that data from QuickBooks and store it in your local drive. And then the second element is it will also upload it to the cloud. So that's the answer to your question, Arun. Thank you so much for asking. The next question is from Kutalingam sir. He says cloud computing is old. Agreed. We have been using it for past 5 years. Absolutely, Kutalingam sir, I completely agree with you. And then Kutalingam sir has another question. Even in best companies cloud, our experience is affected by ransomware. How to overcome such risk? So that's I'm really thankful to you for sending these questions, and that's one of the biggest problems of working with cloud. Just like technology is evolving, people who want to misuse that technology is also continuously evolving. The entire network of hackers and nuisance makers has also increased substantially, right? So things like DDoS attacks, ransomware attacks, phishing attacks, all of these things will happen. Kutalingam sir, there are two ways to handle it. One, there are some good cybersecurity tools and cybersecurity frameworks which you can implement. Now, if you are using a cloud-based setup, get that cloud-based setup audited by a cybersecurity expert. What the cybersecurity expert will do is that he will try to hack that using ethical hacking practices, and in case those practices are successful, he will implement some data security protocols and data security measures. So that's the only way you can. So avoidance is the only way. Precaution is the only way you can overcome this risk. And Kutalingam sir, you also say that your experiences with Azure and you are subjected to ransomware. Azure, GCP, AWS, all of that, we've seen cases. See, the way ransomware works is when you are operating within the cloud, there are various services which are exposed within the cloud using APIs, using ports, and using some communication protocols. If you have ports which are open, then a hacker may misuse it, right? So the way you have to do it is, there is this whole process called whitelisting and blacklisting. One of the most secure ways of accessing data in your cloud is create a layer in the firewall of the cloud system so that it allows only certain IP addresses to communicate with the cloud. If you do this, it's a very easy way. You make sure that no hackers can get into it, no ransomware can get into it, because only your verified IP addresses of your systems can basically access it. Try this, Kutalingam sir, it might work for you. And once again, thank you for your question. The next question is from Mohan sir, who says, what would be your suggested configuration of our laptops or desktops to work with cloud computing? See, the whole idea, Mohan sir, is that your laptops and desktops, they can be very primitive, right? Today, even if you're working with, let's say, an Intel i3 processor or an i5 processor, older generation, and if you have a decent enough RAM, it's okay because the processing is happening on the cloud. That's the whole idea. Whatever is your computer's capability, it does not matter if you're working with the cloud. Even the most primitive computers can work. The only important thing here is bandwidth, right? You need to have good bandwidth so that it can upload and download data at a good pace. And of course, it should not be a very old Pentium 4 kind of a machine. It should be a decent machine so that it has good processing power at the end. It can store information, it does not hang and all those things. But no special requirements. You can be very, very primitive with it. The next question is from CS Sabu Augustine. How do you access previous data once you disconnect the cloud-based service? So Sabu sir, uh, it's a good question, and there are two ways to answer this. One, if your cloud-based service providers wants your money, and if he wants you to pay, you will not be able to access it till you pay for it, right? Because typically what happens is it's a subscription-based business model. You avail the services of that cloud service provider till the time you subscribe to it. If you don't subscribe to it, if your subscription lapses, you basically can't do anything about it. That is one. Second, in case there are some snapshots or archivals based on because some cloud systems, they have this function where they take snapshots and create data files which you can download as a backup of the cloud. If those things are available in your case, you can probably take a backup. And otherwise, the best option is just to write to their customer support. Just tell them that, what, uh, I discontinued my cloud subscription, but I would like to retrieve the files. Probably you need to, make some adjustment with them. But be careful because they only retain the files for some period of time. After maybe a month or something, they may permanently delete those files because most of these clouds, I'm assuming they are public clouds. If you had a private cloud, you would never have a problem of retrieving your files because it's everything in your control. But I'm assuming since you're using a public cloud here, they uh, they are limited by limited storage and processing capability. Hence, you can't really retrieve it once you have discontinued. You have to talk to them, right? Next question is from Narayanan sir, who says, how do you do data encryption in cloud? So Narayanan sir, there are multiple ways of doing it. There is cryptographic hashing which can be used. So every time data is being sent to the cloud, you can convert that data into some other way. And there are many different encryption mechanisms which are there. When you subscribe to a cloud-based data storage service, there are options where you can either take encrypted storage or unencrypted storage. If you take encrypted storage, that is where the encryption will happen by itself, right? So they are some of the ways in which you can encrypt. So guys, thank you so much for sending me so many questions. There is one more question, I think, from Ramji sir. When planning for a cloud-based ERP, which model would you advocate? Whether you will have similar models like FICO Production HR, etc. Absolutely, Ramji sir. Cloud ERPs are nothing but your same ERP which you have on-prem. Only the difference is that it is now moved to the cloud. So if you are using SAP on the cloud, it will have your FICO, production, HR, all of your typical SAP modules will be there. Every cloud ERP will always have a supply chain module, HR module, sales module, finance modules. All those modules will always be there, right? Great. So let me just move ahead with the presentation and, guys, see, we are having so much interaction, which gives you the maximum value from it, right? So please keep asking your questions. So moving on, now that we understand what is cloud, what are the different deployment models, I want to talk a little bit about what are the service models, right? So there are three different service models, right, which differentiates from deployment models. These were deployment models: public, private, community, and hybrid. Now we are talking about service models. This is like, how do they use cloud computing and convert that into a service for you to consume? Now, the first thing is known as infrastructure as a service. What is the meaning of infrastructure as a service? Customer here can control the environment as a service by installing your own operating system, applications, and software. So what happens is they give you an infrastructure, right? So they will tell you that, okay, let's say that a CA firm is taking IaaS. So what Amazon will do is they will say, okay, you know what? I'm giving you this server here. This server has so much space, so much processing capability. Now you as a customer, you can install your own operating system, your own combination of applications, your own ERPs, your own database, your own software, and create it, right? So it delivers a virtual service platforms where access for virtual machines or virtual resources are provided. Imagine this IaaS, very simple way to put it. Imagine you are buying a new computer, which is formatted and blank. You have to install the OS, you have to install the database, you have to do everything. That is the whole idea of infrastructure as a service. So it the only difference is here you don't have to physically buy the infrastructure. You can lease it out from somebody like an Amazon. The second model is known as platform as a service. Now, what platform as a service does is it provides computational resources through a platform on which applications and services are developed and hosted. And the customer is free to build applications and deliver it to other users through internet and server. So this is slightly more restricted than IaaS, right? So here what happens is you are talking about a specific platform, right? For example, you have these automation platforms. uh, some of your cloud-based ERP systems are also offered as platform as a service. The only difference between SaaS and PaaS is that in SaaS you actually use only one software. In platform as a service, you can actually create your own services and applications on an existing platform, right? For example, you have an infrastructure. Within the infrastructure, you have some of the backend and front-end technologies installed in it, like Python, Java, and all of these things. And that entire platform can be given to you as a service, and you can build applications on top of that. Finally, you have software as a service, where the software is owned, managed, and delivered by one or more users. And again, it is offered in a pay as you go or a subscription based model. It runs on the cloud and multiple users are served at the same time. Now, all of us, we are actually using this, right? Platform as a service is mostly used by developers. Infrastructure as a service is mostly used by people who want to implement private cloud, and they're into hardcore tech stuff. But most of us, being in the finance community, in the CA firm community, we are mostly consuming all your software as a service kind of a model, right? So just to give you a little bit more I love this slide. It's a very beautiful slide. It actually tells you that within each one of these different models, the first model is packaged software. What is packaged software? It is your standard way of operating, where you have a software, you install it, then you have infrastructure as a service, then you have platform as a service, then you have software as a service. Now, the more you move to the right side, right, you basically start giving more and more control to the vendor. So you are consuming more and more of services. So this will be the most expensive, slightly lesser expensive, slightly lesser expensive, slightly lesser expensive in terms of the subscription cost, right? But as you move like this, you're moving. This is high capital expenditure, moderate capital expenditure, low capital expenditure, and no capital expenditure. But similarly, software is high operating expenditure, package software is opposite of that, right? So for each one of these four types of services, service offering methodologies, there are multiple components, right? Now, for the sake of your understanding, let me explain what is the meaning of each component, because one of the areas where we as CA sometimes we struggle is that we don't understand this technical jargon very well, right? So I want to keep talking about some of this technical jargon so that you can come back and refer to it. And I also know that this session is being recorded, so I don't know, maybe some this recording might be made available to some of you on request, and you can refer to it when you want to come back and understand this jargon, right? So applications, we all understand. This is the core and exe executable application, which is the basic thing. For example, I'm running this presentation on PowerPoint. We are having this webinar on GoToMeeting. So these are all applications. The second layer is data. Data is, we all know what data is. The main storage components, the main elements which are consumed by the application. Runtime refers to the whole mechanism when you are executing an application to process some data, right? So if my PowerPoint application is not running, we are saying it is not in runtime. However, if the application is running, then that's a runtime. Middleware are like intermediary components which translate data from application A to application B, right? So there are many examples of middleware. For example, I know somebody asked me the question of how do you take backup from cloud software, and one of the answers, I remember I told you that you have to use an RPA tool. So that RPA tool becomes like a middleware. Okay. Then operating system, we all know what is an operating system. Virtualization, right? Virtualization means creation of virtual machines, right? Now, uh, for example, I am conducting this session from my laptop, which is a physical machine. However, I could have also conducted this session by logging into a virtual machine, which means I don't physically have that machine, but I can log into that machine from somewhere else. That is virtual machine. Servers, we all know what servers are. They are, large processing units, and they house all of these components. Storage, we all know. Networking, we all know. Now, in packaged software, you control all of these aspects, right? In infrastructure as a service, you manage the application data, runtime, middleware, and OS. The vendor, so if Amazon is the vendor, Amazon will give you a virtualization service, it will give you server, it will give you storage, it will give you networking. In platform as a service, apart from these four components, you will have the OS installed, you will have all the middleware installed, you will have the runtime agents also installed. You just need to install your applications and data. And in software as a service, of course, this entire layer is something which is managed by the vendor. You don't need to do anything, just log in and start using that software, right? So that's a little bit of a difference. Now, there are some more questions which have come up. Let me look at those questions. Uh, Beena has a question. How big are the cloud servers? How long are they stored for future access? Is it safe to retain personal bank account details? So Beena, that's a great question. Cloud servers are very big. They are in terabytes and petabytes and zettabytes of data. So all of these cloud companies, they have almost infinite storage. They have never yet been limited by storage. They have lots of storage capacity. However, if your question is more from the standpoint of if you are a user and if you want to use some of these cloud servers, then how much space will you get? You get anywhere between 5 GB to 50 GB to 1 terabyte, depending on what plans you take. There are some cloud storage servers like OneDrive, Dropbox, Google Drive, which offer you some free storage. So I think Google Drive offers 20 GB, OneDrive offers 5 GB, something like that, right? So that's how much space they offer you. How long are they stored for future access? It depends on you. If you have an active cloud account and if you don't delete those files, they can be stored there forever. I have been using cloud for almost 12 to 15 years now, and I still have those old files there. They never go away. Is it safe to retain personal bank account details? Please don't do that, Binaji. Do not put any financially sensitive information on public cloud. We have seen enough and more conditions of breach. If you want to use, please use DigiLocker and some of these things, but don't put see, actually, the way the security is functioned, you can actually put it there. There's no major risk from that standpoint, but you never know. That the way the whole cybersecurity landscape is evolving and hacking is evolving, I would say please don't put it there. uh, Sabu sir says, please explain infrastructure as a service once more. If the customer installs own operating system, how does it become infrastructure as a service? So basically, Sabu sir, what happens here is they are giving you infrastructure. Now imagine it's very simple. You go to a new computer store and you buy a new computer for yourself, which is a formatted computer. It does not have MS DOS, it does not have Windows, nothing. And if you're leasing that thing from an internet company or a cloud company, that becomes infrastructure as a service, right? So you have flexibility. Sometimes I'll give you the context here. sometimes developers, they sometimes need to install Linux based applications or Windows based applications, or sometimes they have their own OS also, right? That's the reason why they want to manage the OS themselves. Number two, sometimes, see, this OS also has a cost. So platform as a service will actually be more expensive than infrastructure as a service, because in platform as a service, they're giving you the OS licenses also, right? Sometimes you have your OS licenses yourself. So you don't want to get into that model, but you want just the basic infrastructure, which is storage, server, virtualization, and networking. You just want to take that package and you say that, okay, I will install my applications, my OS, everything. So that becomes infrastructure as a service. Uh, Anjanelu sir asks, what is the legend of color used? So orange here is the components which is managed by you, and blue is the component which is managed by the vendor, right? So this is completely orange, which means, the vendor, cloud CSP, cloud service provider will not give you anything. And then when you have software as a service, then of course the cloud service provider will give you everything. So that's blue is the managed by the vendor. Supraja asks what kind of things we need to make sure other than cloud to successfully manage an application. So your core application code, Supraja, right? See, cloud is just a storage facility, right? Think of it as a storage facility. How well is the interaction happening? You have to build your login mechanisms within an application. So there are multiple components. This is completely the domain of application development and management. So you have to basically, understand that there are many different components to managing an application. Cloud is just the storage part of it, and the security, the login, the credentials, the connectivity with other applications, database management, one of the most important pieces. How do you store your data, in which database? How does the database connect to it? So these are all the other elements also. Sabu sir says, correction to the above, how does it become? I think we answered this question. Uh, Arun Kumar sir says, does these cloud servers have difference in architecture? If yes, do they speak with each other? For example, say if we have an Excel file in OneDrive Microsoft and upload the data into, say, QuickBook, will they speak to each other? So fantastic question, Arun Kumar sir, right? And let me tell you, companies have built business models based on these, right? Um, and this is called integration. Natively, they are not supposed to talk to each other, but obviously this is a big business problem, right? If you're using an Excel file in OneDrive, you want QuickBooks to read it. So they have built integration within each other using APIs and using interconnected connectors and modules. So today there are custom integration channels which are built for many applications, and things like Excel files being read by cloud ERPs and all, that is absolutely doable, right? So yes, they do have different architectures. I will actually show you examples of some of the cloud-based SaaS architectures. And these architectures are very complex, right? Architecture consists of a back-end scripting tool, a front-end scripting tool, a data storage tool, your DDoS attack prevention tool. It's very, very complex. So they're all very different. But yes, there are ways in which they talk to each other. Beena asks, what happens if new technology takes over cloud and it gets replaced with new technology for storage? Do we run the risk of losing data? How else can we store data? So Beena, you don't really run the risk of losing data. If you have a cloud service provider, if they change the technology, they will do that in a very responsible way. I haven't heard of any situations so far where people have changed the entire software and the architecture, and because of that the customer has suffered. It doesn't happen. You don't have to worry about this aspect. This aspect is taken care of pretty well in the entire ecosystem, right? Again, guys, thank you. Thank you for asking so many questions. Oh, we have two more. uh, Manivandan says, hi, in our office we are planning to purchase audit software and we would like to deploy the application in Microsoft OneDrive, but the general response is it is a bit difficult to deploy. Can you please elaborate on this? So, Manivandan sir, unfortunately, I don't know the details of which software you are purchasing and why the vendor is saying it is difficult to deploy. Maybe It is possible because see, OneDrive might just be a, I think what you want to do is you want to use OneDrive for all the storage, and you want your audit software to connect to OneDrive for storing all the files. I don't know why the vendor is saying it. Maybe the software does not have an inbuilt integration with OneDrive, right? But I have seen examples where this is, very easily done. For example, I use many cloud-based SaaS tools. Like there is a tool called Airtable which I use. There's a tool called Trello which I use, and I have integrated them with Google Drive. So all the file storage happens in Google Drive. Technically, it is not difficult to attain. You can always attain that. CAS Venkataramanan sir has a question. A service provider provides audit management software application. The CA firm has to use cloud storage for its application for storage of worksheet. Can this be stored in public cloud or private cloud? Sir, the choice is entirely yours. You can store it either in public cloud or private cloud. My recommendation is, depending upon the size of your firm, if you think a public cloud is good enough, it can handle most of the information in a secure way, then please go with public cloud, because private cloud will be slightly more expensive, but it's your choice. You can see there are some companies which offer both public cloud and private cloud, but what I have seen that the audit management softwares today, they are very primitive, they are not very advanced, so they are able to integrate with public cloud easily, but their ability to integrate with private cloud is a little bit poor, and it might be a little expensive also, right? So you can go with public cloud, but over a period of time, as your practice grows in size, maybe you create an automation by which you transfer the data from public cloud into private cloud, and you purge the data from the public cloud. So in a way, you're using the public cloud as an intermediate, right? So the answer is, if your audit management software can directly integrate with the private cloud, please go ahead and do that. In case it doesn't, then you have to work with the public cloud. Beena asks, how much does a private cloud cost? Beena, it's a difficult answer to give, because that actually depends on multiple factors, like how much space do you need, how many users will you have, how much, what is the period for which you need it, what computing power you need. It's a very difficult answer. What I would suggest you do is go to Amazon AWS cost calculator. You can put all your parameters there. You will get a cost. Multiply that by 2.5. That is what your private cloud should typically cost you. That is one. Second, private cloud sometimes might have a capital expenditure also, because you will need to have a physical space somewhere in your office, or you will need to have a private cloud leased out, right? So it really depends on multiple factors, but typically it is 2 to 2.5 times the cost of a typical public cloud. Right, great. So let me move ahead with the presentation. And then, on similar line, this is just another representation of how that entire segregation works, right? So SaaS is something which includes everything, right from applications to development tools, operating systems, etc. Platform as a service includes everything apart from the application. Infrastructure as a service includes everything apart from the operating system, right? So infrastructure means just infrastructure. Platform as a service is infrastructure plus OS plus development tools, and SaaS is everything, including the hosted applications also, right? Wonderful. Now, what are the different service types, right? And I'm giving you some examples here. And now that technically we understand that what is cloud, what are the cloud deployment models, what are the cloud service models, I want to give you example of how people are using it, right? How people are using it. So there are four main things. There is business process, there is application, there is platform, and there is infrastructure. All of these BPO companies and business process outsourcing companies, which are called business process as a service companies, they are actually offering these main functions on the cloud, right? So let me explain this to you. Typically, how does the BPO company work? A BPO company picks up the outsourced business which is given to it by some of the customers in the US or some other regions, right? So what happens is somebody wants to outsource their finance and accounting function to India. Now, what some of the companies like Genpact and some of these BPO companies, what they do, is that they create their own cloud. So Genpact has its own cloud, their own private cloud, on which they have HR modules, contact center modules, finance and accounting modules, payroll modules. And then based on that, they leverage the cloud structure to create business process as a service. So this is like software as a service, but slightly deeper, because software as a service is just one software. This is entire business process as a service, right? So for example, if somebody is giving you finance and accounting BPaaS, what this basically means is that it will have accounting module, payroll module, your accounts payable module, accounts receivable module, everything. So this is slightly deeper. Now some other people are just giving out applications in a software as a service model. For example, companies like Salesforce, like Microsoft, all your cloud ERPs, right? All your cloud ERPs are actually examples of SaaS. So CRM tools, collaboration tools, business intelligence tools, search engines, so on and so forth. They are examples of using the whole cloud algorithm and the cloud network for applications. Third, you have these platform as a service where you have, basically this is more for developers, right? Infrastructure as a service is for hardcore developers, where you have companies like IBM, which give you hardcore, your AI machine learning infrastructures and things like that. And for platform as a service, you have companies like Google, who are giving you with a combination of database, process queuing, object storage, runtime, identity management, credentials management, and so on and so forth, right? So this is how people have actually converted this into various types of business models. What we need to understand is platform as a service and infrastructure as a service are more relevant for more technology heavy people who are creating these technical solutions. And then you have applications in terms of a SaaS and business process as a service, which are more relevant from a end business user kind of a perfect perspective, right? So that is the difference between all of these things. And I see that I have some more questions. Um, CA Venkataramanan sir asks, the point is, you said it is not advisable to store personal bank statements or financial information in public. Then can clients' information be stored in public? It is safe. See, the idea is that the way public cloud works, Venkataramanan sir, is that they are fairly secure. So your AWS, you see, there is this certification called the SOC 2 certification. Please look this up. Any public cloud platform which has the SOC 2 certification, it means that it is fairly secure. So that's a good benchmark. See if they have the right certifications. See, actually, you can't move away from using public cloud because private cloud is very expensive. The only way I assess public cloud is there are some certifications like VeraSafe certification, SOC certification, SOC 2 type 1 certification, some of these things. If those platforms have these certifications, for me, I feel they are secure enough and we can move with it. And your please always take declaration from your clients. Tell them that, look, I am going to store your information in such and such server, which has such and such and such, certifications. And that's it. The moment you do that, then it's fine. Almost everybody today are storing client information in public server. That's not a problem. Manivannan has a question: to access my application audit software in cloud, do I really need remote server license, which is being insisted by my vendor? Okay, so this is a good question, Manivannan sir. See, basically what happens is it depends on the architecture of your application. It seems that right now the architecture of the application of your audit software is one where the audit software is installed on their own servers, and you need to do a RDP or a remote desktop connection to access that. This is not the only way in which systems can be accessed. For example, I want you to look up this new technology called AWS Workspaces, right? There's this new technology called AWS Workspaces which has come in. And what this technology does is that it basically lets you access a virtual machine right from your browser. And you don't have to procure any licenses on your side, but that is a very advanced technology. I'm not saying that it might be relevant for your vendor, but I'm just telling you. So in this case, what your vendor might be saying, it might be true. Uh, but then again, I don't know which audit application and all of those things. And yeah. See, one of the things I'm going to do is that I will share my contact details with everyone. In case you have any specific questions, specific things you want me to look into, I always like to help people out because it's a very small community and we are very good as CAs, we are very good process experts. But sometimes when it comes to technology, people sometimes take advantage of us also. So Manivandan sir, you can also drop me an email. I can, with some more details of which software, etc. I can look it up and come back to you. Rajesh Kumar sir, you say please share recording and presentation of this session with all participants will be great reference point and conceptual understanding. Sure thing, Rajesh sir. I will be sharing this presentation with SIRC and I will request them to share it with you. And apart from that, also, I will leave you with my credentials. We can stay connected and I can help you out in that front also. Okay, so moving on, right? What is the impact of cloud computing on business? And even though we have kind of covered this slightly, there are four main benefits. Number one is cost effectiveness. As I said, public cloud is very, very cost effective. You can basically, it's more like paying rent for very, very good computing space and computing speed. So as you start off, even if you want to build your own software, people, for example, AWS, Amazon Web Services, I keep coming back to it because it's one of the best examples of the cloud space. They have recently launched this initiative called AWS Activate, right? Where they are giving free credits to the tune of anywhere between $5,000 to $100,000 of free credits to use the cloud computing space to startups, right? So if you're a registered startup, you can get, and even if I think it might be relevant for some of the CA firms also, I'm not sure. If you are a startup company which has been registered within the next past 2 or 3 years with a limited size of turnover, then you can actually request for some free credits, right? So please look into that piece also. So cost effectiveness when you're trying to build your own software is the first thing. The second thing is flexibility. Cloud gives you unlimited storage capacity. What is the meaning of unlimited storage? You can scale up of your storage, the storage you need as and when you want, right? According to the situation. Third is business continuity, right? So the primary reason why people have started using cloud is for data backup, right? And this data backup works for you because what if something happens in your physical premises? What if there's a fire and something gets destroyed? So it ensures your business continuity. In case people who are on this webinar today, in case you don't have access to simple cloud backup and a cloud storage facility, please do something about it. You must have a cloud backup just for the sake of business continuity. And then, of course, collaboration is a big theme. For example, when I work with my internal teams, I use some of these applications. If I'm working on a PowerPoint file, I can actually see if I'm storing that file on a cloud platform like OneDrive or Google Drive, I can see real time which of my team members is editing what slide, which team member is adding one row in Excel file. So if you really start using it, it's a great productivity booster. With that being said, let's take a quick 2-minute break. I will just go and take a sip of water and I will be just back. In the meanwhile, you can keep contributing to the question. So I will be back in about 60 to 120 seconds. Okay, guys. So it was really quick, and I am back. Yeah. You guys can still see my screen. Okay, so I will go back and see if you have put any more questions. Uh, Please share the PPT and contact number if possible. Yes, Arun Kumar, I will do that. With respect to RP, is this to be created by us or available? It is available, Arun Kumar sir, and I can definitely help you with that. Is there any alternative to ISO certifications, which Supraja asks? Yes, Supraja, there is alternative. There are these SOC certifications, which is also very useful in the data security space. Then there are these VeraSafe certifications which are there, which is again on the security standpoint. But ISO is a good certification, good fundamental certification to start off. Jerome asks, do we need to take a backup of cloud storage? How can I be satisfied that the data can be recovered anytime? So Jerome, it depends upon who your cloud service provider is, right? If you look at the way cybersecurity threats and attacks have taken place, fortunately, the history says that there hasn't been many serious attacks which has led to loss of data if you're using some of these prominent platforms. So based on history, you can be pretty secure. However, what I do sometimes for my critical files, I maintain 3 copies. It's on my hard drive, it's on one of the cloud platforms, and I also take a physical drive copy, right? But that, I'm just being a little paranoid about my data. You don't really need to do that. Your cloud-based thing, I think, is good enough. Murli says, how safe is iCloud for personal data with all my Apple devices linked? Murli, I myself, I use iCloud and I'm on a premium plan of iCloud. iCloud is actually very secure. It's because the way Apple stores data, it's very different from the way Windows stores data, and it's encrypted by design. So I use iCloud, but then again, when I am storing some sensitive information, let's say that I'm storing my passwords or some bank account details or something like that, I add additional layers of encryption into it, right? So, for example, I might add a layer of I might password protect that file also. I might put it in an archive and password protect it. Some of these mechanisms can be used. Then we have another question from Venkataramanan sir. Is there a risk that the regulator or other government authorities have a right to seek information from cloud service providers without the knowledge of the customer? So, uh, Venkataramanan sir, if you would have, if me and you we would have been Chinese citizens, my answer would have been different. But right now, see, to be honest with you, they can do anything. The government authorities can do all these things. But I don't foresee it happening for 2 reasons. One, all of these main cloud service providers are non-Indian companies, and they have a very strong board of ethics, and they typically don't do this kind of stuff. Second, government would be obligated to disclose it to you, right? And I don't think that this may be a reality. But this being said, we such things do happen in some of the other countries, and even in the US you have a lot of these scenarios like these. Narayanan says, what is the scope of cloud computing as a business model for CAs? Narayanan, the scope is very large, and I'll tell you where does the scope exist. See, as a CA, you are an expert in understanding financial data. So you could do a lot of consulting work with companies who want to store that data, or who want to process that data and process the financials and financial books of accounts, right? So if somebody wants to implement a cloud ERP, then they can basically have you as a consulting partner, right? So wherever you are building any systems which includes financial data, because I do a lot of that work, right? Some of my clients, when they want to implement cloud financial ERPs, they want me to investigate it and look at it and give it a nod. That's fun. Second, as CAs, we are also in the information security audit space. And as the whole economy keeps heating up and becomes more and more laced with regulations, people like us will have to give audit and assurance in those areas also. So you have to understand the cloud models very well. Thirdly, if you understand how the whole cloud implementation works, you can actually start implementing it also for some of your customers as a specialist in that area. So there's a lot of scope out there. Manivandan sir, cases where information are stored in dedicated data server, who will have access to all the data? In case if there is a breach, will there be any notifications to the user? So Manivandan sir, again, it depends upon how the dedicated data center is being stored. Uh, See, I'll tell you, there are two types of companies, right? If somebody has made a mistake and they want to hide that mistake, they might not give you a notification. If there is a breach, then somebody might not want you to know. Technically, they are supposed to give you a notification as fast, the moment there's some kind of a data breach. So ideally there should be a notification to the user. And who will have access to the data? Well, actually, nobody apart from you should have access to the data, not even the cloud service provider. The cloud service provider technically cannot access your data because your data is both encrypted and stored behind credentials which they don't have access to, right? So technically only you will have access to your data, right? Great. So moving on with our presentation, here are some examples of who are the top cloud service providers. Amazon Web Services is number one. Uh, I often used to ask this question to people earlier, that what is Amazon's primary business model? Amazon's primary business model is not retail and it's not Amazon.com, but this is the primary business model. It's the world's largest cloud service provider. Then you have Microsoft Azure, IBM Cloud, Google Cloud. Google Cloud is giving a very tough competition to all the others right now. It is also very aggressively coming in Indian markets. Then you have the Oracle Cloud, you have SAP Cloud, Salesforce Cloud, Rockspace Cloud, Alibaba Cloud. This is more in the China markets and some of those regions, but mostly top three: AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. These three are the top platforms, right? And this is a very, very, very interesting statistic, that the COVID-19 pandemic has overshadowed all aspects of life over the past year, including IT. And the survey shows that organizations' cloud plans and adoption shifted massively, with 90% of them reporting that cloud usage was higher than initially planned, right? So if you look at this graph here, this is the change from planned cloud usage due to COVID-19, and 61% people said slightly higher than planned. 29% people say significantly higher than planned, right? So somebody had a question regarding the business model. You have to follow a business model right till where it where the money is, and the money is here. This is phenomenal, right? I mean, 90% people have just increased the consumption and it is unexpected for them. So I'm sure there will be people who don't understand how to implement this, right? And that is where the money is right now. Let me go back to the questions. Let me expand this. Yes. Okay. Arun Kumar asks, are the cloud storage companies governed by data storage regulations like the IT Act of India or health laws in US? Yes. So Arun Kumar sir, the way this has functioned is, see, all of these big cloud companies, they are governed with regulations at two tiers. One, they have a centralized board of ethics and data security regulations as part of the whole thing. Second, apart from this, they are also bound by the local and geographical governing laws, right? Now, some of the interesting regulations. Now, you mentioned the health laws in US. So in US, there is this regulation called HIPAA, HIPAA, for your health regulations. And in fact, I did some implementation work for some clients in the US. So I had to sign the HIPAA agreement, right? In the European region, you have the GDPR, which is a very nasty data privacy regulation, but it is mostly in the space of using personally identifiable information, right? So wherever you are collecting data or storing data which can be used for identifying individuals. So if you have phone numbers, addresses, bank accounts and all of these things, then there are lots of regulations. Now, India still doesn't have, very surprisingly, India still doesn't have a lot of privacy regulations, and it will come up in a major way. I'll tell you one of the reasons why probably India doesn't have it is, when these regulations came in the European Union, it really completely tossed them apart and created a very, very big havoc there. And some companies even had to shut down. So it's because they were very strict about it. But yes, I personally foresee a very big regulatory landscape which is supposed to come. Right. Uh, Sabu sir asks, are infrastructure of cloud service providers in one place? Is there mirroring of data? Mirroring of data takes place. There is this entire concept called high availability and disaster recovery, which is known as HA and DR. The way HA and DR works is that if your data is stored in one place, it gets mirrored across multiple servers. But then again, there are various cloud storage plans. Some of the plans may give you access to disaster recovery and high availability. Some of the plans may not give you access to that. So it really depends on which plans you have access to that. But yeah, technically mirroring can take place. Supraja asks, what kind of work are we going to have if India hits GDPR like regulations? Now imagine, Supraja, when you had the IFRS convergence happening, when you had the GST happening, right? They were more directly in the financial services space. But if you start building your presence in the cybersecurity and IT compliance and system security and audit space, you will have tremendous work, right? Number one, you will have to audit applications and IT systems to see if they are GDPR compliant or not. And there is big money in that. GDPR compliance audit is very expensive. If people have to get GDPR compliance audits done from firms outside of India, they will charge in tens of thousands of dollars. That's as high that service fee can be. So that could be one very, very easy area where you can look into it. The other area would be consulting for companies who are creating the new products, right? So since GDPR is again the whole compliance and regulatory landscape, you can understand GDPR better and you can create your own metrics and advise people that how can they create GDPR compliant software. There is this whole theme called privacy by design. I am also working with a couple of startups where we are trying to create these systems which have privacy by design, where you have GDPR compliant solutions right off the bat, right? So there is a lot of work which can come. You also have a follow-up question, Supraja. You ask, how do we become cybersecurity experts? See, there are many cybersecurity programs and courses which are available. You can take some of them. If you drop me an email, I can probably give you some links, and you can probably start with that. Okay, so we already covered this software as a service. I will not repeat it. And we also spoke about, what are the different types of SaaS applications. Once again, a combination of CRM, marketing, collaboration, fintech, ERP platforms, so on, so forth, so forth. And these are some examples of popular SaaS applications. You should actually, in order to find out how tech savvy you are, you should take a poll with yourself. How many of these applications do you actually use, right? HubSpot, let me do it for I use HubSpot quite frequently. HubSpot is a marketing automation software. Shopify is a SaaS application for creating your own websites and e-commerce portals. Dropbox is used for storing files. MailChimp is used for running out surveys. Slack is used for productivity. G Suite is just like a combination of your Gmail, Google Drive, Google Sheet, and all of these things. Jira is a project management software. SAP Concur is another CRM. Adobe Creative Cloud is a SaaS application for videographers and all of those people. Salesforce is again one of the world's largest CRMs, right? So guys, believe it or not, I'm just realizing apart from SAP Concur, I actually use all of these different SaaS applications. Yeah, and maybe I think all of you must be using at least Google. Dropbox is a very, very good platform for you to store files easily. HubSpot is a very good platform if you want to do some, automated email marketing and some of those things, right? So it's a very interesting slide on the popular SaaS applications. And And we already spoke about what are the product benefits and all of those things, and advantages also is something we already discussed, so I won't go to it. Now, I want to spend maybe 5 or 10 minutes on some of the slightly technical concepts, right? And slightly more heavier concepts. And this is more on the idea of tomorrow, if you're building your own SaaS based platform, how will it basically work, right? There are two types of architectures. There is a single tenant architecture and there is a multi tenant architecture. The meaning of a single tenant architecture is that if you're a SaaS company, if you want to deploy your SaaS model individually for individual organizations, which means you will implement. For example, SAP is a single tenant architecture. However, multi-tenant architecture would mean there's a single platform with a shared database and a shared cluster of applications, and all organizations use it together. For example, gmail.com is a multi-tenant architecture. Facebook.com is a multi-tenant architecture. You don't have multiple versions of Facebook for multiple different users, right? A multi-tenant architecture is far more complicated to build, and you see this little layer here called Docker. Docker is basically a mechanism by which it quickly creates replicas of applications for every organization. So it's a much more server heavy piece. So typically, when you look at SaaS based applications, if it's a multi-tenant SaaS based application, then it is a far more capable application than a single tenant application. And this is a sample architecture diagram. Somebody asked me a question in the beginning regarding architectures of SaaS platforms. So you have multiple layers. So this is a cloud layer. Within the cloud layer, you have a file server, you have databases, you have the application. Then internet is the place using which you basically do all the transactions. Intranet is the company specific private cloud within which you can have a workflow engine, data management engine. So it's very complex. The idea is to not get into details of this, but uh, we should just take a look and see, what does it look like. So tomorrow you should know, okay, this is what it basically looks like. Now coming specifically to cloud-based SaaS ERPs, and remember I said these are nothing but your standard ERPs which were used to be implemented on-prem, but now they have basically moved to the cloud, right? So you have the Oracle NetSuite as one of them. Microsoft Dynamics is the Microsoft ERP. Then SAP, there are two types of cloud ERPs. You have the SAP ECC cloud and you have the SAP S4 HANA cloud. Then of course, you have the Zoho, which you must be familiar with, JD Edwards, Workday, Deskera, Brokerment, so many of them. For finance and accounts, the most prominent ones is QuickBooks is one of the biggest ones. Then you have ZipBooks, you have Zoho, FreshBooks, you have, Tally has recently started a cloud version. So you have all of these different versions for your financial applications also, right? And what are the benefits of moving to SaaS-based platforms specifically for finance and audit, right? So first, it can help you in automating several manual bookkeeping and accounting processes, right? For example, your SaaS-based ERPs can have automated reconciliation. You can create a backend architecture where in the backend it automatically does a lot of things. Second, it eliminates the paper environment. I have personally done a lot of work in automating some of the work for my client where we have implemented things like touchless accounts payable, paperless invoicing, and things like that. Third, you can access your accounts anywhere, right? You can put it on a mobile phone. You can access it, from a laptop anywhere. You have very, very easy access to it. Fourth, you can get live bank feeds. You can create a system of notifications. If something happens, you can get a notification for that thing. Then you have secure sharing of data, where data sharing becomes very, very secure. Easy scalability to meet growing business demands. You already discussed that. You pay for only what you need at that point of time. Tomorrow, if you want more data, more capacity, you can get that very easily. You get access to the latest technology because since in SaaS, remember, software is managed by the vendor. So whenever there is a new version, you don't need to worry about which version you have to upgrade and things like that. That upgrade happens on its own. You get access to real-time information. You have always working with the latest software version. and you can also set up your integration with your online payment gateways and things like that, right? Then what are the key things you have to consider when you build your own SaaS application? Of course, what are the functional features? What is the layer of analytics? What are the user roles? So you need a creator, a reviewer, an editor, a publisher, a manager view, a dashboard view. What are the different views which are there? And if what is the typical roadmap to build your SaaS platform? Number one is you have to do your market research and give your product specification. Number two, define a monetization strategy, which means how will you monetize it? What will be your subscription model? Will you charge on a per user basis, on a per month basis, so on and so forth? Third, what is going to be your technology? Decide on a cloud infrastructure provider and tech stack. So two things here, right? Cloud infrastructure provider means whether it would be a public cloud, private cloud, hybrid cloud. Within that, what kind of service will you consume? And tech stack means your core technology, which will reside within the cloud, right? Then you create a minimum viable product, which means a functioning version of what you want to create. Based on that, you test and modify and create your final product. And then you promote and you basically release and maintain the app. And this is just again for your information. Some of the best technologies right now for front end development are things like HTML, Java, CSS. This is called Angular. A stands for Angular JavaScript. This is the symbol for React JavaScript. So there is a front end technology. Front end technology means all of that technology which is used for creating user interfaces, forms, your website pages, and things like that. Similarly, your backend technology is the entire processing layer. So it has your Python, Node.js, Java, React, Go, and some of these things where, this is the whole processing engine. And obviously, you have a storage part of it. Storage could be across your databases like MongoDB, MySQL, and some of these, different areas. And then finally, what are the typical challenges to building a SaaS application? Number one, it needs to have scalability. Make sure that it's something which can scale up in the future. Second, security is a very important component. Third, reliability, which means what is the uptime which it will have. Make sure that it is fairly robust in that perspective. Fourth, in terms of integrations, remember somebody also asked the question that do various platforms talk to each other? So you have to make sure that these platforms, they basically talk to each other, and some of those things are also very important, right? Let me see if you guys have more questions. There is one more question. Can you please explain the pros and cons between cloud server and dedicated server? Which one do you suggest? So you need a dedicated server, Manivandan sir, when you are upping your game, right? If you are creating an enterprise grade application, or if you are doing a very large engagement with a client which is a very large client, and you need to be very particular about data, then you need a dedicated server. But cloud server is more like public cloud, and you can use it for most of your stuff, right? Unless you want to scale up, you basically you can use a cloud server, right? Okay, let me just stop sharing for a minute, and let me quickly, I just wanted to, and in the meanwhile, guys, once again, thanks for all of these questions. It is wonderful to see so many questions coming up. I really appreciate your sharing all of these questions with me. And that's pretty much, guys, what I wanted to cover today from an entire presentation perspective. I hope that this session added some value to you, and then this was useful to you at some point of time in the future. I just wanted to leave you guys with my credentials. Please take a note of this. This is my email address. I am actually very bad on the phone. I miss phone calls quite a lot, but if you write an email to me, I will almost always respond. But the best way to stay in touch with me is to connect with me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn handle is linkedin.com/in/Saurabh Goenka, and I'm very, very responsive there. And that's the best place to basically touch base with me. Once again, guys, thank you so much for your time and participation here today. Thank you once again, Ramji sir, for organizing this and giving us extremely participative audience. Arun Kumar, you said, are there any sites which we can watch for knowledge enrichment? Arun, what I would recommend is just start following me on LinkedIn. I publish 2 or 3 posts every week, and there are many articles. And on my LinkedIn, you will find a lot of papers which I've published, and I keep publishing a lot about these things. And that could be a good place to for you to go with it. So that's it, guys. Once again, thank you so much for your participation, and I hope that this session was useful.
Thank you, Saurabh.
And
It has
I
been
still have some 10 more minutes.
it has been a very excellent in-depth session. I think, even though you said it will be a basic session, I felt that a lot of things you covered, like what are the characteristics of cloud architecture, and then the stages. You started with the stages because it was a good refresher. Then you talked about the 4 different types of cloud deployment, public, private, and therefore one important thing which I thought I should ask you is when there is a migration from the traditional ERP server based to a cloud based ERP, what should be the checks which an auditor has to ensure? No? Suppose they are doing
Sure.
that.
So that's a great question, Ramji sir. So basically, whenever a migration takes place, right? Number one, you need to ensure that uh, all of the data gets migrated along with the historical data. Sometimes what happens is that when people are in the hurry of migration, they don't migrate data beyond the past 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. But from an auditor's perspective, you need the entire trail. That's number one. Number two, these migration plans are typically always with a lot of backlog. People would want to do it on time, but it never happens. So sometimes what may happen is it may affect the time they take to close their books of accounts, because they may say that it is migrating and reports won't generate. So you have to make sure that the migration doesn't take place at that juncture where the entire book reports publishing and closing of books of account, that period is there. So it should happen independently, right? Third, once it is migrated, it needs to go through a complete data security check, just to make sure that the firewalls are implemented, the roles and privileges are assigned in the right way. There is a good maker checker balance which is there, that the admins have been configured in the right way, where is the data being stored, and some of these things are the important points there.
In fact, generally you find that in all these cases where they planned for a go live within 6 months, has taken more. Sometimes it has taken more periods. Almost 1 year has gone by,
Yeah.
and
It is
so
very
therefore
common,
there
sir. It
should be
is
a
very, very common.
that old and new. The old should be there till we are able to successfully go live. Isn't it?
Correct. So it has to be a parallel implementation. There needs to be a parallel implementation of your system, and a parallel run till the time we are stable with it.
And the importance of manuals. Manuals, when you shift, what are your milestones which you are supposed to have?
100%, sir. Because see, there are 2 or 3 things. One, there is this something called a solution design document, which gives you the entire architectural layout of the cloud. That is important. Second, your SOPs, right? Are there any changes in your standard operating procedures with respect to how you access the data? Third, your entire migration log in terms of when has what data been migrated. And fourth, what is very important is that you need to have the right user manuals in place, because the users who are using your on-premise ERP solutions and the way the cloud-based ERP solutions are used, it may go through some minor change, right? So how do you basically address that? You have to have a very, very strong, manuals and also a training mechanism so that everybody is trained and they are up to date with using the new system.
In the concept of licensing also, no? What are the conditions which generally you should be taking care to put there? What are the general
See,
conditions?
one thing, absolutely. So Ramji sir, one thing which I have seen is uh, sometimes people buy unnecessary licenses. Okay, the way the licensing structure works is that it is modular. See, you don't need to buy license for the whole ERP. You need to buy licenses only for certain modules and certain users. So that estimation needs to happen very correctly. That is where a lot of money can be saved, because all the ERP companies and obviously everybody, they want to maximize their revenue. So avoid enterprise packages, avoid large packages, go with specifically what you need, right? And that's one. Second, we have also seen situations where sometimes these license files get leaked. So storing of those license files in a very secure manner is very important, because sometimes some license files are like some .lic files or something which can be applied and some other software can get activated with that. So sometimes some employees, they will try to leak these files and make some money for themselves. So the storage and management of licenses is very important. Third important thing is, when your licenses are getting renewed, we should always renew them in advance, because the more delay we have in renewing them, it actually lets you forego some of the discount which you might have achieved in case you renew it earlier. These are the 3 or 4 things with respect to licensing.
How would this version controls? Version controls, the importance of version controls, and what kind of checks we should have.
See, sir, there are in version controls, there are two important things, right? Number one, creating a tracker and tracking when version upgrades are planned by the software vendor. For example, if you have implemented SAP HANA, SAP will publish an official roadmap that on such and such date, I will have such and such release, such and such patch, such and such fix. So the IT team needs to proactively plan for it and create that downtime, because whenever a patching happens, there might be some downtime. Now we can't take that downtime from an auditor's perspective and from a business user perspective. That downtime should happen on a holiday, or it should happen, when some non-critical business activities are going on. So from that perspective, your release management and patching is a very, very important aspect. It needs to be planned well. If it is planned well, then in today's world, it is, it is pretty straightforward.
Okay, I think if there is any other question which you see on the chat box, you can just answer, or we can.
Can you please share the presentation? Yes, Tina will do. Thankful for piercing cloud. Thank you, Venkatraman sir. Thank you for wonderful. Have how to overcome the security challenges without knowing the architecture. How can we implement? So Saranya, it's a great question, and you need to understand the architecture to identify potential data leakage points. Unless you don't have an architecture, then you can't really do that. Okay, these are the only questions. Then we have lots of thank you messages, but these are the only questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Saurav. It was a great session. You had taken us through the entire gamut of cloud computing as well as the software as a service. I thank all the participants. I think we had more than 100 and odd of them who have patiently been with us, and while you have, and also raised so many relevant questions. It was actually quite useful for all of us. I also thank SIRC for giving me this opportunity to chair this program. Thank you very much for being with us, and thank you, Saurabh, for sparing your valuable time. Thank you. I think
absolute pleasure, sir.
The presentations will be shared through the SIRC. They should be, if you are going to share with them, they will definitely forward. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for being with us today. Thank you and good night. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Have a great day.